He's fully briefed, etc. This is not happening in a vacuum. Obviously, he had a very controversial call this week with the president of Pakistan. A U.S. president has not gone to Pakistan, met with the Pakistani leader in, a decade. And then on top of that, Trump this week had a phone call with the president of the Philippines, Duterte, who, by the way, threatened famously not long ago to break off, relations with the United States militarily, sort of the allied relationship, and also at the same time, it was just a few months ago that he said that President Obama could go to hell, his words. So here's what the Philippines president said on that call. I think we have it.
He was quite sensitive also to our worry about drugs, and he wishes me well in my campaign, and said that well, we are doing it as a sovereign nation, the right way.
It's significant that he says that Donald Trump said he's doing the war on drugs the right way, because it's a very aggressive war on drugs in his country that has led to thousands of people being killed. What's the significance there?
Well, I mean, I've covered some of this. There have been, by police figures, more than 2,000 people killed by Philippines cops in 5 months since Duterte took office.
In 5 months.
Part of this war on drugs. So you've got like a dozen or more bodies showing up a night in the capital, Manila, suspiciously with handguns next to the corpses, and all seemingly killed by police in self-defense after they pull their guns. So this is really bloody what's going on there. And the Obama administration has been criticizing, as of a number of human rights organizations in Western countries. Duterte hates that. He curses the European Union. He curses the U.S. He seems to have a visceral anti-American feeling, even though the Philippines is probably one of the most pro-American countries I've ever been to. And what's remarkable is, while he doesn't get along with President Obama, soon after President-elect Trump was elected, he said, hey, we both like to swear, we're the same guy. So he seems to recognize a similar sentiment or temperament in President-elect Trump, and he even appointed before the election Trump's business partner to be the Philippines' special economic envoy to the U.S.
Ivan Watson, a lot to digest there. Thank you very much for the reporting. We appreciate it. Lucky to have you in New York with that perspective.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's bring in my panel. Ben Ferguson is here, a CNN political commentator, host of The Ben Ferguson Show. Mark Lamont Hill is with us, CNN political commentator, also host of BET News and a professor at Morehouse College. Just digesting what Ivan just said. Mark, this isn't being done in a vacuum. This is within the span of a week, the president-elect having very controversial phone conversations with the leaders from Pakistan, from the Philippines, from Taiwan, something that hasn't happened in 40 years. We knew that he wasn't going to be the same leader as past presidents. He is proving that to us. Should this be such a surprise to people?
No, it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, throughout the campaign, President-elect Trump did not demonstrate any sophisticated understanding of foreign policy or the delicate balances that exist in the geopolitical landscape. That doesn't mean that everything he does is necessarily wrong. When President Obama entered office, people said, hey, he's going to engage North Korea. Hey, he's talking about engaging Cuba differently. And although it hadn't been done, that wasn't a sufficient reason not to do it. Sometimes you have to do things that haven't been done before. The difference is, with Donald Trump, it doesn't seem as if he had some sophisticated, nuanced plan to engage Taiwan. It seemed as if he didn't even understand the relationship between China and Taiwan. He didn't understand that we didn't have direct relations with Taiwan for any particular reason. And so that lack of knowledge is what concerns.
So his team, Kellyanne Conway, said to Anderson Cooper last night that is absolutely not the case. She said he's well aware of what U.S. policy has been. He is fully engaged, fully briefed. But Ben, I want you to listen to what Trump said at a rally in August about, here's an example, why he wouldn't disavow his, what some see as an embrace of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
But they say Putin likes Trump, and he said nice things about me. He called me a genius. He said we're going to win. That's good. That's not bad. That's good. Some of my opponents said, we want you to disavow that statement. Why would I disavow? Okay? Why? But if we could get along with Russia, wouldn't that be a good thing instead of a bad thing?
So that was on the campaign trail, Ben, in August, and these calls that Ivan was just speaking with us about seem to be a continuation of that. Wouldn't it be better, he says, if we had a warm relationship with Russia, with the Philippines, with Taiwan? issues in some of these countries that do not align with U.S. policy, belief, or standing, just like Ivan described in terms of the very controversial war on drugs in the Philippines. So where's that, as a Trump supporter, where do you want that line drawn?
I think it's very clear that he says, I would rather open up a dialogue early on and see if maybe we can have better relations and maybe have better deals are made and have better conversations. It's been since 1978 since the last president spoke with the president of Taiwan. He's saying maybe that's long enough. It's the same logic that Barack Obama used when he was talking with the Castro regime down in Cuba.
So you don't worry about it. The difference is China. You don't worry about it infuriating China, a country, the United States needs on the UN Security Council and needs when it comes to North Korea?
Bobby, China always acts like they're infuriated anytime they don't get their way. They always, through their state media, overreact to statements. And this is not as big of a deal as many are making it out to be. And my point is, we've been selling billions of dollars of weapons to Taiwan to directly use to defend themselves against an aggression if China ever decided to do that. So the idea that Taiwan's going to be more outraged over accepting a phone call from Taiwan than Barack Obama sending billions of dollars in sales of weapons to that country is a little bit overreaction from everyone that wants to attack Donald Trump here. Donald Trump took a phone call. That is what he did. He didn't sell any weapons to Taiwan. Obama did that. No one freaked out over it.
Just to be clear, from the readout from Taiwan on this call, they did talk about things such as national defense. So it wasn't just a congratulations, Mr. President-elect. Mark, let me get your take on this, because this week, as Ivan and I just discussed, Donald Trump, spoke with the president of Pakistan, and according to a readout provided, from Pakistan, he told the prime minister, quote, "You're a terrific guy. You're doing amazing work, which is visible in every way." Obviously, the relationship with Pakistan is complicated. There's a reason no U.S. president has been there in a decade when it comes to nuclear proliferation, when it comes to, the questions over harboring terrorism. What's your reaction to this series of phone calls and Pakistan specifically?
I don't have a problem with phone calls per se. And again, I wish Ben was this open to engaging untapped territories 8 years ago when Barack Obama was doing it. But I do think, again, it's not a question of just engaging these countries. It's a question of asking, what does getting along mean? Getting along at what cost? So if we're going to engage Pakistan, what does that mean? How do we think about human rights? How do we think about the geographic positionality of Pakistan? How do we think about the harboring of terrorism? How do we think about these things? Are we simply going to talk to everybody and let them tell Donald Trump how great he is? Or are we going to make a hard line and we're going to have a strategic purpose in each place? I'd love to talk to Putin, but if we're not going to stop fighting proxy wars in Syria, if we're not going to talk about the annexation of Crimea, if we're not going to talk about the fundamental issues, then there's no point in talking to these nations. We have to have a plan and we have to have a strategy.
Ben, I want to get this. Ben, I want to get this into you. I want your take on this because he will name a Secretary of State soon, and if it is a Mitt Romney or someone like that he's had very different views with when it comes to some of these major U.S. relationships and some of the foreign policy with Russia, etc. Does this complicate things for Mitt Romney? Can he stomach phone calls like this?
Not if you know going in what you're going to be dealing with here. And I think what Donald Trump has made very clear is diplomats have not done a great job for America recently. We've been winning, or I should say we've been losing more than we've been winning on the international stage with many countries, including Russia. And so he's going to go direct. He is a negotiator. And I also think he understands one other thing. It's a lot easier to have a really rough and tough and blunt conversation with a foreign leader if you have a rapport with them before those conversations start. It's the same thing that Ronald Reagan did with Gorbachev. He talked to him, he met with him, but he was also incredibly tough with him and told him to tear down that wall. And it worked. And I think Donald Trump might be looking at that and saying, okay, if I want to be really blunt with China, I don't want to do it necessarily through the media or through diplomats. I want to know who I'm talking to and negotiating with on the front lines. And that includes Taiwan or Pakistan for that matter, because when you have a rapport, you usually get more done.
Ben, I have to leave it there. Mark, Ben, thank you guys very much. A lot coming up. Moscow meddling, new details about Russia's reported attempts to interfere with the U.S. election as Democrats push to make secret reports public. We'll explain live in the CNN Newsroom next.
Choose to go, to indulge your curiosity. Explore a new road to see where it takes you. Meet the leaders who change the game. No matter where you are,
been viewed around the world, including this claim. Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism. And of course, that Twitter storm ended with Trump flat out calling his predecessor, President Obama, bad or sick. Quote, how low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon Watergate? Bad or sick guy? Look, I'm a trial lawyer. And it occurs to me that the combination of those tweets is potentially defamatory. Not that I'd expect President Obama to file suit, but let's game this out. If Obama were to sue Trump, a public figure, then Obama's burden of proof would be actual malice, meaning he would have to show knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. In other words, it would be reckless for President Trump to say that President Obama committed a crime if President Trump knew that to be false or that he was reckless in making the assertion. Now, of course, truth would be a defense for President Trump. So what evidence or witnesses might Trump present on his own behalf to establish truth? Not Devin Nunes, the Republican chair of the House Intel Committee, who this week said he doesn't think there was an actual tap of Trump Tower, nor James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, who said no FISA warrant was issued on his watch for such a wiretap. FBI Director James Comey will testify on Capitol Hill come Monday. We already know that he was reportedly so upset at President Trump's claim that he wanted the Justice Department to refute it. And Trump can't count on the Brits, whose Prime Minister Theresa May had a spokesperson issue a statement saying the claim that their intel aided Obama in tapping Trump was, quote, ridiculous. Now, on Thursday, Sean Spicer spent 9 minutes quoting a long list of mostly conservative news sources close to him. But none of that is coming into evidence in our hypothetical. It's all hearsay. In fact, it's unreliable, double or triple hearsay at best. Many relied on anonymous sources of the very kind that President Trump has been railing against. Trump relied on Andrew Napolitano at Fox, who had no first-hand information of GCHQ, the equivalent of our NSA, having spied on Trump at the behest of Obama. Fox News itself said it could not substantiate Judge Napolitano's commentary. And speaking of the former president, we know from the statement issued by Obama's spokesperson that he claims to have never ordered the surveillance of a U.S. citizen. So, what's the verdict? The verdict is that President Obama appears to have a very strong claim for libel. He can establish every element of the tort. So what are President Obama's potential damages? Conceivably, he's entitled to punitive damages. Think about that for a minute. Punitive damages are damages designed to hurt, to punish, to deter. But of course, it all depends on the composition of the jury. Because to the 46% that got Trump elected, this is just noise. So what's going to happen next with President Trump's ongoing battle with the intel community? Joining me now, the former director of the CIA and NSA, General Michael Hayden. His memoir, Playing to the Edge, American Intelligence in the Age of Terror, is now in paperback. General, GCHQ is the British equivalent of the NSA that you ran here in the United States. Is it conceivable to you that the British equivalent of the NSA would get a telephone call from an American president who says, please tap the phones or the office space of someone running for president, and that they would cooperate?
Michael, I'm sorry. I'm trying to suppress a laugh here. That is so far from reality, so far from the relationship we have within the Five Eyes community. Look, we're really close. It is an integrated operation, but one absolute rule is that no one can ask a partner to do that which is illegal for himself or that which is illegal for the partner. And that's never been done in the Five Eyes Alliance.
Has the NSA, to your knowledge, I have to ask this just to close the loop, ever been asked in a similar type of circumstance by one of our allies, will you please eavesdrop on someone seeking the highest office in our land?
Michael, That's way up there in terms of seriousness. I'm telling you, we can't do anything for an ally that the ally itself isn't allowed to do. And so, no, you can't export or offshore these requirements because your law prevents you from doing them. I mean, look, this is done by the rule of law. I get it that it's espionage, it's secret, it gets... If they ever got wind of this, my God, it would be a nuclear detonation.
That preacher who used to preach so strong, what happened to that singer who used to sing our song?
Where is it going, and what concerns General Michael Hayden the most?
Yeah, so number one, because the White House is sticking to this story in about, what, Michael, a 15-minute period yesterday, we embarrassed one and angered another of our most important allies in the world. So, core question, where is this going? I found that interview with the president and Tucker Carlson quite interesting. Some folks said that he was doubling down on his claim. Actually, I don't think so. I think he was picking up his chips and going to another table. He was backing away from the literal accusation that President Obama had done, which you've reported on, ordered the wiretapping of Trump in Trump Tower. I think where this is going, Michael, and I think this is the lifeline that I think the administration is hoping they can grab onto, is something that we call incidental collection. And it may take a minute, but I can explain to you and your viewers how this might work. So, if we're up against a legitimate foreign intelligence target, and let me just, for purposes of explanation, say we're targeting, and you'd want us to do this, a Russian oligarch who's involved in money laundering, or how about sanctions busting, all right? And so we're on that target. And this is, by the way, Michael, this happens fairly routinely. If that target now gets involved in a communication to, from, or even about a U.S. person, okay, we're still allowed to continue to cover the target. We just have to protect the U.S. person privacy. We do what's called minimize the information. So we might say this Russian oligarch in an extended conversation with a named U.S. person, so on and so forth, said this. And we keep the U.S. identity minimized, unavailable to our customers, unless, of course, Michael, the named U.S. identity is critical to the intelligence. Let's say, for example, that the oligarch was actually arranging an illegal transfer of funds, in which case we would unmask the identity so that we'd have a full picture of the intelligence. Now, keep in mind, we're just targeting the foreigner. This is called incidental collection. And the unmasking of the U.S. identity isn't Trump, isn't Bush. It goes back 40 years, these procedures, to the reforms in the American intelligence community in the 1970s. So I suspect if there is any example of a U.S. identity being unmasked that has any relationship to the Trump campaign or Trump Tower, and again, Michael, very normal, very correct, very legal, I think at that point, the White House goes, aha, I told you so. I think this is where it's going.
Do I understand General Hayden to be predicting that perhaps the next step of this is that the Trump White House seeks to criminalize the incidental collection of U.S. intelligence? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, mischaracterize and criminalize. And Michael, very tellingly, Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff, chair and ranking of the House Intelligence Committee within the last 36 hours, has actually asked the American intelligence community, was there any incidental collection? Were any identities unmasked? And who requested the unmasking? So I do think we are going to that point again, which I think at the end of the day will be mischaracterized, and there will be an attempt to claim that that's some sort of violation.
Okay, that's a pretty significant prognostication from General Hayden. What would be the impact of that on the intelligence community.
And look, anybody who knows the business would simply go, yeah, that's how this is always done. This is actually a very good way to do our job and protect American privacy. And so it would be just kind of the wheels of the process going forward. By the way, Michael, that procedure I just laid out for you is approved by the Attorney General, reviewed annually, and those procedures are annually laid out to the intelligence committees who understand them. And again, remember that unmasking thing I did, Michael?
Of a mighty rushing wind.
Is so routine that it's done within the agency. You don't need to go to the White House. You don't need to go to the court. It doesn't even come to the director. It's done by the analyst in close cooperation with NSA lawyers who know this best.
Imagine that you're still running the CIA or you're still running the NSA, and President Trump calls General Hayden and says, General, I need to know, was the Trump Tower surveilled? Could you answer that question?
Of course I could. And if he had the follow-on question, was there any incidental collection, and did you unmask any identities, I could answer that question too, because, Michael, I have. Recall, this is years ago, when we were trying to get an ambassador, Mr. Bolton, confirmed for the United Nations. He had actually asked for some unmasking of identities, and some members of Congress were kind of rending their garments that this was some kind of great offense. I went on, explained the process to them, and actually indicated that these requests from Ambassador Bolton were actually quite appropriate and innocent. So again, we're not out of the norm here. It's just new to a lot of people. It's not new itself.
Final question, and you've just answered it, but I want to underscore this. He often watches us. Thank you for that, Mr. President. We like you watching. If he's watching right now at Mar-a-Lago, he could pick up that phone this minute, call the CIA, call the NSA, and ask the question, was Trump Tower surveilled? And he'd get an answer, right?
Michael, all he needed to do 2 weeks ago was to roll over, punch that button on the red switch, and say, get these guys down here for lunch, and he would have been satisfied, and we would have been done with this.
General Hayden, thank you as always. I really appreciate your being here.
Thanks, Michael.
What are your thoughts? Tweet me, wow. Tweet me at Smerconish, and nothing prevents it. I mean, just nothing would preclude that kind of a phone call from being made at this moment. So then, of course, folks, you got to ask, why doesn't he make that call? Maybe because he already knows what the answer is and doesn't want to have to then be held accountable for it. Anyway, tweet me at Smerconish. I'll read some during the course of the program. Catherine hit me with something. Smerconish, to 46% who got Trump elected, you and the media are just noise. Robert, that's sad, isn't it? Because I deal in facts, my friends, and I just presented to you as a trial lawyer how this issue would be litigated if that were to be the case. And what a shame if a certain number among us don't care about the facts. Up next, Chris Cillizza, editor of the Washington Post, The Fix, wrote that Sean Hannity had the worst week in Washington and that he had hit a new low on Thursday. But would Spicer's boss agree? Chris is here to discuss.
Display this week. I'm sure you saw this heated exchange between one of conservative media's biggest stars, Megyn Kelly, and Trump supporter Newt Gingrich. You know, there's a lot of conversation about how he accused her of being fascinated by sex. But look at this exchange a couple minutes before that.
You think Trump's going to win Pennsylvania?
Look, all I can report to you right now is they're outvoting the Democrats in early voting, which is also true in Florida, which is unprecedented.
But all of the polls in Pennsylvania have her winning.
What?
All of the polls in Pennsylvania have her ahead.
I know. I just told you we have two alternative universes right now.
All of the moves that have been on this map over the past 3 weeks by Larry Sabato, by Cook, by the Fox News decision desks. These are nonpartisan outlets that are just trying to call the electoral
They're not
scoreboard.
nonpartisan outlets. Every outlet you described is part of the establishment.
Fox News? Really? Are we? I don't think so. And they
come on.
What a revealing moment there. Gingrich saying that Fox News is part of the problem. He's a paid Fox News contributor, by the way. But he was right about the parallel universes. I think we all feel it right now. The timing of that fight was fascinating because it happens that Kelly is in negotiations with Fox about a new contract, a big new contract. But she may. Rupert Murdoch took her contract talks public this week, saying he wants her to stay, but there's lots of other people who could take her place. So how will the results of the November 8th election affect all these cracks that have splintered conservative media, and perhaps more importantly, the GOP itself? And what's next for Kelly? Joining me now, a trio of top conservative media columnists. Jennifer Rubin of The Washington Post. She writes the Right Turn blog there. Rich Noyes, a research director for the Media Research Center and a senior editor for newsbusters.org. And back with us, Matt Lewis, a CNN political commentator and senior contributor at the Daily Caller. Rich, your study this week got a lot of attention, including from Trump and Mike Pence. You said 91% of media coverage on the nightly news of Donald Trump was hostile in the 12 weeks that were after the conventions leading up until now. Now, tell us about how you came to that conclusion. What does that 91% number represent?
Well, we looked at all the evaluative statements. We stripped out the campaign rhetoric. We didn't count Trump sound bites about Hillary Clinton or about himself or vice versa. This is the reporter statements, the nonpartisan experts they'd bring in, the voters they'd bring in, partisans who broke the partisan mold that would then get attention in the news. Things that really lent a spin. We found almost 700 statements about Trump. 91% of them were negative. We found fewer than 200 about Hillary Clinton. About 79% of those were negative as well. But my conclusion looking at that is that she's really was out of the line of fire in the news media up until, I guess, this past weekend. And he was the central focus, and it was very, very negative.
When you look at the fairness between the coverage of Clinton and Trump, would you think it's fair to say that Clinton has had fewer controversies or more controversies for the news to cover?
Well, she's got her controversies, and they're certainly getting less airtime. We found 440 minutes of this airtime devoted to Trump controversies, 185, about 40% of that to Hillary Clinton. Now, you could argue that the email controversy, which is now back in the news, the Clinton Foundation pay-for-play, those are potentially very significant controversies about her time in public office, going right to questions of ethics and competence, and yet those were getting far less coverage than, say, Trump and his behavior towards women, which is certainly a valid issue, Trump's taxes, things like that the media seemed more eager to cover, whereas with Hillary Clinton, they seemed ready to call that old news, again, until this weekend. Our study stopped October 20th.
Jennifer, do you look at this study and see the playing field being tilted in Clinton's direction?
No, I see that this is actually the Donald Trump strategy. To the consternation of Republicans, whenever the coverage and the storyline has drifted to Hillary onto terms that might actually be beneficial, he's grabbed the spotlight back. He knows exactly what he's doing. This is how he, frankly, got through the primaries, when he got overwhelming coverage by the networks. So I don't think that this is necessarily the media choosing to root for one side or to make him look bad. It is an intentional strategy on his part. I also think that, frankly, you could take any segment of the election, these 12 weeks. If you took the period of time, for example, when the FBI, the news was quite negative for a very long period of time against Hillary. So there is an ebb and flow, and I think just to say 91% of it during these few weeks goes this way doesn't look at the election as a whole. And I think it will be interesting at the end to see how the numbers play out over the entire election season.
Matt, talking about Newt Gingrich here, talking about that Newt Gingrich-Megyn Kelly exchange, I played that Parallel Universes soundbite because I think it's the key to understanding what's going on right now. The folks are in their own echo chambers. Do you have any advice here, all sides, during this election?
Well, I mean, I think that it's really a microcosm right now, as you were saying, of the conservative movement. I mean, Newt Gingrich is wearing his hat as in the role of the surrogate, so you would expect him to defend Trump. So that sort of deserves an asterisk. But even if you put that aside, I think you have a sort of a nationalist, populist, pro-Trump conservative movement that Breitbart.com is maybe the most indicative of that. And then you have a more mainstream, maybe the National Review is more indicative of that. I think Megyn Kelly is sort of at the center of this. If Fox News keeps Megyn Kelly, then I think it's a clear sign that they're going to be, that they want to move in the sort of a thoughtful center-right National Review direction. If she goes, and you have, for example, Sean Hannity becoming the marquee primetime host, then it's a sign that they're going the other direction. So as the conservative movement is sort of splitting away and trying to decide what it's about, Fox News is like a microcosm of that battle.
Rich, do you agree, or do you agree with Matt, or is it possible that Fox News can be all things to all conservatives or even moderates?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, Fox is going through its own changes right now, but, you know, they have been up until the election. Well, I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, Fox is going through its own election, and really including this election, the one place on television, cable television news, where conservatives felt they were getting a fair shake, getting some respect, getting their point of view across. Now conservatives are split amongst themselves, so some are unhappy with Fox on one night, or they like this host, they don't like that host. So, you know, when the conservative movement sort of pulls itself together, it'll be easier to serve them as a constituency. Until then, it's going to be more difficult.
You know, you tweeted something earlier, Rich, that stood out to me. There's been a couple of polls showing that most Americans think the media writ large wants Clinton to win, not Trump to win. And that feels to me like a problem. It feels to me like a problem if most Americans think that the scales are somehow tilted in Clinton's favor. And yet at the same time, I don't know how to separate that from Trump's dominant anti-media rhetoric that he's always candidacy. When you look at the polls that show that, do you think that it has a lot to do with Trump's anti-media rhetoric, which he has toned down in recent days?
Well, I mean, that's part of it, but the other part of it is you have journalists. This week, Dana Milbank was one who got out and say the press can't play it fair anymore. The press can't play it neutral to be neutral.
But he's a liberal columnist.
Well, I know, but he is talking to other journalists. He is suggesting that it is illegitimate to give Trump the same treatment you would any other there, and take sides because it's too important to leave to the voters to make up the decision themselves. You know, they're basically playing into Trump's hands and saying it is a rigged game, and then they're demonstrating that with their coverage every night, being much more adversarial against Trump than against Hillary Clinton.
Well, Jennifer, you work at the Post. How do you feel?
I disagree, and I think this is one of the problems with conservative media and conservative watchdogs. They don't, for example, as you pointed out, distinguish between the actual reporters and the columnists. I don't think anyone can accuse David Fahrenthold, who has done really Pulitzer Prize-winning work, investigative reporting, as being by his job. He's digging. Part of this is fueled by the fact that Donald Trump refuses to reveal a lot of information that most candidates have traditionally done. So there's more to find out on that side. But I would say something else. Fox for a long time has played this game of saying, well, we have our opinion shows, Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly, but then we have straight news from people like Kelly, and people like Brit Hume and so on. And I think what has happened is these distinctions have gotten completely blurred. They put Sean Hannity at a desk that looks like a news desk. They have the bug on it that says Fox News. And so that they have really sort of eviscerated these distinctions between what is real news, what is hard news, what has to be corroborated, what is based on facts, and what Hannity and O'Reilly do. And I think that was a mistake for them. I think it has denigrated from the real news people like Megyn Kelly, like Bret Baier, by associating them, and then everyone thinks that Fox is Sean Hannity. Everyone thinks that Fox is Bill O'Reilly. And when you point that out, they get very offended. But frankly, it's a game that they started and they exploit.
Hannity has been raising the prospect of voter fraud. And when you look at polling, that compares fans of CNN versus fans of Fox, for example, you'll find that Fox viewers are much more concerned the election results could be manipulated. Jennifer, do you feel that conservative media leaders are misleading their audience about that?
Some of them are, and again, it's very hard to say conservative media anymore because there are very big distinctions. Listen, some of the best analysis debunking the it's being rigged has been done by conservative media, has been done by National Review and others. So I think you have to really separate those people who maintain a journalistic standard of accuracy, of fairness, and those who are simply shooting off the top of their heads. Listen, Sean Hannity perpetrated the birther lie too, and that is my objection to putting those folks on with a news label, because they're making stuff up, and that's not news.
I'm all out of time here, but thank you all three of you for being here. I appreciate it this morning. Thanks.